Okay, folks, we come to lesson number 2. And tonight, consider Mark chapters 2 and 3. There are about 8 sections that need some attention in this lesson, and some minor sections beyond that. So we need to move pretty rapidly through this, more rapidly than I would like to. But I would like to at least touch the different sections of it. We saw the Gospel of Mark as it opened with a preface in which the person who is to be the subject of this book is put before us by means of testimonies. The testimony of John the Baptist, which identified Jesus as the Messiah of Old Testament prophecy, and then the testimony of the Father at the baptism of Jesus, identifying Jesus as his Son. And so Jesus is put before us as the Messiah and as the Son of God. Page 1 of the book. The other little piece of material that is a part of that preface is the summary account of the temptation of Jesus. And that shows Jesus coming in conflict with the devil. He's not in league with the devil at all, as he'll be charged in chapter 3 with. But he comes in opposition to the devil, and his aim, as we shall see, will be to destroy the works of the devil. Now the Son of God then, the divine Son, the Messiah of Old Testament prophecy, appears among men as a man, and he reveals himself, shows himself to people in 2 primary ways. What are they?
Words and works.
Okay. Diana, are you saying M&Ms now?
M&M's, WW's. Message and miracles, words and works.
Okay, I was trying to make it easy with 2 W's, and she's translating it for children into M&M's. Okay, well that'll work. So, words, the teaching, and people saw the teaching and they were astonished. They were stunned at the authority with which he spoke. Now, he did not appear before them and say, "Listen, I'm the Son of God," and manifest himself that way. But he just showed himself with his teaching, and they were astonished at the authority. And then the miracles, the works that he performed, which amazed them even more. And so as he began to reveal himself, his ministry was met by an immediate and by a tremendous popularity. People saw these things, they began to tell others, and people were coming to him from far and wide, and great crowds were gathered about him. Now in chapters 2 and 3, we see him continuing as he did before, showing himself to the people in words and in works, and we're going to pick up the various things about Jesus as we go. We'll be looking for what Mark thought about Jesus, what he wanted us to think about Jesus. We want to just pick it up as we go, not anticipate, not read into it all that we know, but we just want to let this book make its impression upon our minds. Now, as we turn, though, to chapters 2 and 3 in this new section, we see the introduction of 2 new elements. One of these relates to the reaction with which his work is met. And what is that? What is the new element with regard to the way he is met? The popularity increases, but along with that what?
Opposition.
Opposition. Hostility. Which was shown in what ways? What charges were made against him? The very first one was what?
Blasphemy.
All right, blasphemy, claiming the prerogative of God to forgive sins. Then next was what? The charge that grew out of keeping company with what? Publicans and sinners. So he was charged with that. Then there was a question about fasting. I think that does not have the hostility back of it that some of these other areas of conflict had. But then there was another charge that related to what with regard to law keeping? What subject? Sabbath. Okay, doing that. His disciples were doing that which was unlawful, and they were trying to accuse him of doing that which was unlawful. And then the thing we need to notice, try to trace this developing conflict as it goes. It reaches a climax with what great charge against him? Yeah. He's casting out demons by the power of the devil. And we'll try to take note of all these things and give a little bit of attention to each of these sections as we come to them. But I think the main thing to be traced through chapters 2 and 3 is this new element, the conflict, the controversy, the opposition. The cross cast a long shadow. It falls back all the way back across the ministry of Jesus. And from very early days in his ministry, he carries on his work in the shadow of the cross. So from very early days, we see where it's all headed. Now the other new element has to do with what he was showing about his mission. Now we saw him as he was teaching, we saw him as he was performing miracles, healings, casting out demons and those things. But the other new element that has to do with his work and why he came that is introduced in this is what? Now, the place that you ought to focus on, that'd be clearest, I think, to see the point here is his answer to the charge when he was mingling with publicans and sinners. How did he answer that? Came to, not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So, the new thing that we have introduced here is we see that he came to teach, he came to he performs miracles, whether that was a primary object of his coming or not, but he does that. But he does not just come to deal with the body, to heal the bodies of people, to relieve suffering, but he comes to deal with the problem of sin. Now that already comes out in this first little block of material, the healing of the paralytic man. How does it come out?
Well, he said he forgave his sins, but didn't heal them.
Thy sins be forgiven thee. So right away we see this new element in it, that he came to deal with the problem of sin. So let me read. I'll try to be clear, but read as rapidly as I can here. And when he entered again into Capernaum after some days, it was noised that he was in the house, and many were gathered together, so that there was no longer room for them, no, not even about the door. And he spake the word unto them. And they came, bringing unto him a man sick of the palsy, born of 4. And when they could not come nigh unto him for the crowd, they uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed whereon the sick of the palsy lay. Now, when you consult Luke's account of this, which is in Luke chapter 5, it says they went up on the roof and they removed some tiles from the roof. So apparently they're not just tearing the fellow's roof up. It was evidently something that could be removed and maybe put back quite easily. They let down the bed whereon the sick of the palsy lay. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins are forgiven. Now the thing I think may be worth noting here is Jesus' observation about their faith. There be several different points in Mark where we see him taking note of faith in people. Sometimes he takes note of the lack of faith. And one of the things that I've noticed about it is when faith is observed, there's a characteristic that stands out, the determination that is involved in it, the tough-mindedness of faith. Here were people that came. Jesus had something they wanted. They understood that they could get it from him, and so they bring this paralyzed man. And but they come, and the crowds are drawing all about. The house is full. They're standing in the door. There's no way they can get to him. Well, there's the time, of course, to give up. You just go home. You say, well, we'll come back earlier another day. Something like that. Not these fellas. Not these fellas. Not if they have to climb the roof. Not if they have to tear in through the roof and let him down. Jesus has something they want, a blessing that they are determined to get, and they will not let obstacles stay in the way. They must have it. They come in the spirit of Jacob when he wrestled with the angel, and he said, I will not let you go until you bless me. That's the kind of determination and fierce, determined spirit that we need in pursuing the things that Jesus has for us.
Were they satisfied with what he did first?
The,
Were they after that?
when he said, "Thy sins are forgiven,"
Yeah. Or did they want him to be healed?
well, I think they no doubt brought him to be healed. I don't guess it says, does it? Whether
Not that I could.
I don't know why he approaches this the way he did. Whether there are passages that show us that a man does not always suffer. Suffering is not an invariably a sign of sin in a person's life. But in this case, there may have been some connection, or Jesus may sense that there's a longing in the man, that he's interested in something more than just getting his body healed. Anyway, he does respond in this way: "Thy sins are forgiven." But there were certain of the scribes sitting there and reasoning in their hearts, "Why doth this man thus speak? He blasphemeth. Who can forgive sins but one, even God?" Now they overlook some possibilities here. One is that he may be God, of course, but I'm not sure that's the point of this. The thing that stands out, it's the Son of Man, as he goes on to point out, the Son of Man who has been given authority to forgive sins. And so the thing they're not noticing here is that God may communicate to man the power to act for him. And it is in his humanity that he's been given authority to forgive sins. The apostles were given a similar power when Jesus sent them out and he said, "Whosoever sins you forgive, they are forgiven," in John 20. And in Acts 2:38 and other passages we see whose sins they did forgive. A person who would obey the gospel. But they ignore those possibilities. And straightway, verse 8, Jesus, perceiving in his spirit that they so reason within themselves, saith unto them, "Why reason ye these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the sick of the palsy, Thy sins are forgiven, or to say, Arise and take up thy bed and walk?" Now, he does not say which is easier to do. Some of the commentators take it about that way, which is easier to do, to forgive sins or to heal the man. And if there's any emphasis on that, then maybe the point is that if you can do one, you can do the other. One's no harder than the other. But it seems to me it focuses in on saying it. Which is easier, to say to the sick of the palsy, Thy sins are forgiven, or to say, Arise and take up thy bed and walk? Which would it be easier to say and get away with it?
Which would be easier to convince them of?
Yeah, that's the thing I'm trying to get at there. There's no, if you say take up your bed and walk, there's no escaping if there's not some power there. That would be the hardest to say, I think. The other is an invisible thing. Has to do with the mind of God and got the divine record and those things, whether somebody's sins are forgiven. And he arose and straightway took up the bed and went forth before them all, insomuch that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, "We never saw it on this fashion." So Jesus is manifesting himself with words and works, or with message and miracles, as Diane says. So we've got words and works here. We've got a claim. The claim to what?
Son of God, Son of Man.
Have the power to forgive.
The power to forgive sins is the emphasis here. And we've got a miracle, the healing of the paralyzed man. And what is the relationship? Now, here's a new element. We get to learn what the relationship is between words and works here. What relationship is pointed out between the words and works? That you may know what? That the Son of Man hath authority on earth to forgive sins. I'll say this. And he tells him, take up your bed and walk. The man who couldn't walk, they brought him, let him down. He was helpless. Now he's going to take his bed home. He walks out. So he does the thing out there in the visible world, something that somebody could walk up to, could examine, could know whether it really happened or not. And the thing that he does out there in an area which is subject to being examined and tested, will prove the claim that he makes about the unseen world, the spiritual world, the sins of man and man's relationship to God, the power to forgive sins. So his claims are sustained by the miracles. The words are confirmed by the works, and that is the relationship. So we see that the miracles are really subordinate to the words, and they give support to the words and prove them. I'm not moving fast enough on this. I think I need to move on now. And, he calls himself the Son of Man in verse 10, and this is the favorite title that Jesus uses for himself. And I've pointed out in the study guide that there are two main points involved in this title. In Daniel chapter 7 verses 13 and 14, there is a messianic prophecy, and the Messiah is described as one likened to a Son of Man. And then at the end of this chapter, Mark 2:27 and 28, we're going to see Jesus connecting this title, the Son of Man, with his connection with humanity. So they're reflected a couple of things here. He's identified with Old Testament prophecy about the Messiah. It's a messianic title. But it also brings out his what? His humanity, human nature. He's Son of God, but he's also Son of Man. All right then, verse 13, and he went forth again by the seaside, and all the multitude resorted unto him, and he taught them. And as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the place of toll, and he saith unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. Now when you compare the parallels, for example, Matthew 9 and verse 9, you see that Levi is another name for whom? For Matthew, sitting at the place of toll. He was a publican, a tax gatherer. And then in 15 is this feast, which is in Levi, or Matthew's, house. And it came to pass that he was sitting at meat in his house, and many publicans and sinners sat down with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many, and they followed him. And the scribes of the Pharisees, when they saw that he was eating with the sinners and publicans, said unto his disciples, How is it that he eateth and drinketh with publicans and sinners? It's interesting, tax gatherers and sinners are just, as a rule, paired together so many times in the Gospels. They were outcasts, like the irreligious. And, gathering taxes, and that's bad enough, but for a foreign government, you have to go back to the taxation without representation in the days of the colonies to understand the things that Jews must have felt about tax gatherers. And a tax collector would be a man who didn't much care what they thought, I would imagine.
Were they Jews or Gentiles?
Yeah, they were Jews.
And the sinners were Jews too?
Yeah. The publicani were wealthy people, usually Romans as a rule, who would buy the taxes and then they would go collect them and at a profit. And Matthew and people like him would be under them, local tax gatherers who would do the actual collecting, and would just be paired with sinners by people like the scribes and the Pharisees. Verse 17, and when Jesus heard it, he saith unto them, They that are whole have no need of a physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. So, when they make this charge against him, it gives him the opportunity to reveal himself and explain further about his mission. He came to deal with sin. And this is the way he explains his mingling with sinners. He goes among sinners in the spirit of a doctor, a physician. And he sees them as sick. And himself has come to minister to them. But he goes among them as a doctor. Now, not to go and have a high old time with them and to share with them in their sins, but as a doctor who goes to help, but at the same time taking every precaution to what? Keep from keep from being contaminated by the disease or infected by the disease himself. And I think this is the thing we need to understand about Jesus going among the sinners. All right, and when they claim to be righteous, he takes them at their word. Well, then I don't have anything for you. I came not to call the righteous but sinners. There's not much he can do for the self-righteous. Now, they were in need of him as much as anybody. But when they say, we are the righteous, gather up their skirts, and they wouldn't mingle with the sinners. Well, he takes them at their word. What can he do? I came to call sinners and to minister to them. A person has to recognize his need of the Lord. In 18 and following, we have the next question that is raised on the subject of fasting, verses 18 to 22. And John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and they come and say it unto him, Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but thy disciples fast not? It may be that this banqueting was going on at a period of fasting, and that would be why this question about fasting is raised just in this connection. And Jesus' answer to that is given first in verse 19. And Jesus said unto them, Can the sons of the bride chamber fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then will they fast in that day. Notice, the first reference to what? Is death. Time when the bridegroom would be taken away. But his first answer to that is that you don't fast at a what?
At a wedding.
All right, at a wedding. That's a time for joy and banqueting. See, fasting has to do with mourning and those kind of situations. It's the appropriate expression of that. You don't fast at a wedding. While the bridegroom is here, they're not going to fast. It just clash with the whole set of circumstances. But when the bridegroom leaves, then they'll fast. And nobody will have to come tell them to, and nobody will have to write any rules about it. It'll be appropriate and natural for them to do it. So the thing he's going to teach is what about fasting? He doesn't make a ritual out of it, does he?
Yeah, a reason.
Or a ceremony. He doesn't say once a week or twice a week or anything of that kind, but do it what?
For the reason.
And it's appropriate to the situation, natural. You fast at times where banqueting and partying would just be inappropriate. And we'll see, this is perhaps an oversimplification, but we'll just deal with this passage and look at others as we get a chance in some other connection. Now, I think verses 21 and 22 are just making the same point again. This about the garment and about the wineskin. Folks have sometimes seen this as being a contrast between the old covenant and the new, or the old tradition and the new teaching that he brings. But look, these are just other illustrations of this very same thing. That is the fitness, the propriety with which a thing is done. You don't fast at a wedding. They'll fast when the bridegroom's taken away. Verse 21, here's something else. It's just not done. It's not appropriate. It's not fitting. No man seweth a piece of undressed cloth on an old garment, else that which should fill it up taketh from it the new from the old, and a worse rent is made. So that's something that's just not done. The old garment is shrunk as far as it's going to. You put that new piece of cloth on there, and it'll shrink and stretch and tear the old. This is not done. It's not done. You don't fast at a wedding. You don't put an old piece of cloth on a new garment. Or the other way around. Verse 22, and no man putteth new wine into old wineskins, else the wine will burst the skins, and the wine perisheth and the skins. But they put new wine into fresh wineskins. So again, just something that doesn't work. It's not fitting. You don't put new wine in old wineskins. Those old wineskins have stretched as far as they can. They've become brittle. That wine, new wine, will ferment and expand and give off the gases and just burst the wineskins. You don't do that. Now, the thing that confirms the explanation I'm giving of that is Luke's account. At the very end of Luke 5, at verse 39, now he's just given these other illustrations, and he adds another one at verse 39. He says, "And no man having drunk old wine desireth new, for he saith the old is good." So, if it's the old teaching and the new, then he's got the old coming out better here. It really doesn't fit, but it does fit this idea that every illustration is an illustration of doing things that are fitting and proper and appropriate. Things that belong together. You put things together that belong together. And no man, after drinking the old wine, wants new. He says, "No, give me the old, it's better." That does not happen. So, fasting, not to be done. At a wedding, it's when the circumstances are appropriate. That's his answer to that. I know we're being too brief, but I want to get to all of our different sections here. The next controversy is over the Sabbath, and there are two sections that deal with that. And first, this grain field incident, verses 23 to 28. "And it came to pass that he was going on the Sabbath day through the grain fields, and his disciples began as they went to pluck the ears. And the Pharisees said unto him, Behold, why do they on the Sabbath day that which is not lawful?" Now they were not violating the law, but they were violating tradition. They had built up just hundreds, I think, of laws and rules about what was work and what was not work. Here's a man going through the field, he plucks some grain. They have no objection to that. I mean, a man could take what he wanted to eat, no matter whose field it was. The law just said, don't pull your wagon in there and load it up. Just take what you can eat. They have no objection to that. But here, plucking the grain, they're reaping. Luke says they're rubbing it out in their hands. So they're threshing and then eating it. So they call that work. It's ridiculous. That's not what the law is talking about. This is no more work than sitting down at the table and picking up your fork and raising the food to your mouth. But they caught him, and they're going to charge him with violation of the Sabbath, doing that which is lawful. And Jesus will first dispose of their charge by answering them from the Old Testament, giving a similar situation with David. "And he said unto them, Did you never read what David did when he had need and was hungry, he and all they that were with him? How he entered into the house of God when Abiathar was high priest, and ate the showbread, which it is not lawful to eat, save for the priest, and gave also to them that were with him." So, that disposes of their position. This was the case. I've got the passages that this refers to in the study guide here. But it's the time when David was fleeing from Saul, trying to get away, approaches the high priest, and he gives him this showbread out of the tabernacle, which was to be changed every week, and the priest would eat it, and they'd replace it with new. Only the priests were to have that. Well, under those circumstances, the high priest gave that to David and his men, and they ate it. These Pharisees would have no problem with that. And yet, here David was doing something that strictly according to the law was unlawful. The thing Jesus and his disciples were doing was not unlawful, only a violation of their tradition. So he just silences them on that basis. But he goes further than that, and in verse 27 and 28, he points out the true nature of the Sabbath, which was greatly misunderstood by them. And he said unto them, The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath, so that the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Now they were treating it as if a man was made to keep the Sabbath. hedged about all the Sabbath law with all these rules about it, and it had become just a burdensome thing. It was as if man were made to keep the Sabbath. The fact of the matter is, God's intent was that the Sabbath was for man's good. A day of rest for him, a day of meditation, something that was to be a blessing for man. It was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So they completely perverted the whole intent of it. And he ends by saying, so that the Son of Man, notice that, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath, so that the Son of Man, this is the passage that shows the connection that this title, Son of Man, relates him to man. It brings out his humanity, so that the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. The Son of Man, the Messiah, who is the head of the race, he has authority over all that pertains to the race and to this which is for their benefit. And he doesn't need some scribe come running up here to tell him how the Sabbath is to be observed. He well understands it, and he knows how it's to be observed so that it carries out the divine intent and serves man's need instead of becoming the burdensome thing that they were making it. I think that's his point here. But the controversy over the Sabbath is not over, and in chapter 3 there's another incident in the synagogue. And he entered again into the synagogue, and there was a man there who had his hand withered. And they watched him whether he would heal him on the Sabbath day, that they might accuse him. He was watching to get something, and bring a charge of some kind. And he saith unto the man that had his hand withered, Stand forth. And he saith unto them, Is it lawful on the Sabbath day to do good or to do harm? To save a life or to kill? But they held their peace. And when he had looked round about on them with anger, being grieved at the hardening of their heart. Notice, Mark opens up the Lord's heart again, and you see inside, and you see what's there. He saith unto the man, Stretch forth thy hand. And he stretched it forth, and his hand was restored. And the Pharisees went out, and straightway with the Herodians took counsel against him, how they might destroy him. So they're up in arms over healing a man on the Sabbath, but it's perfectly all right to go out and plot a murder on the Sabbath day. They're just hypocrites. They're out to get him. Well, he doesn't leave them much for a charge, does he? How much work does he do? All he does is speak. They're going to charge that. What does the other man, the man who's healed, what does he do? Gets up, stretches forth his hands. That work? No wonder they became so intense in their opposition. He just frustrated them to death. There's nothing. He leaves them with no charge to make it all. But the key is at verse 4, the question that he raises. They were asking the wrong question. They were seeing it as a matter of to work on the Sabbath or not work, to do or not do. And they were asking the wrong question, at least so far as it pertained to the sort of situation he was dealing with. He says, is it lawful on the Sabbath day to do good or to do harm? You see, he has no choice but to do something here. The doing good, healing the man, would be one thing. But if he has the power to do something for that man and he just leaves him there in his suffering, then what is that? That's to do harm. There's no choice between doing and not doing. It's the nature of the act, and to answer the question, which act is appropriate to the Sabbath? And they're on the spot about that, and they had no answer. They held their peace. To save a life or to kill? What if it's a life or death situation? And you may have to work furiously to save somebody's life, but here he's out drowning, and you can throw him a rope, but that's work. Just leave him, let him drown. Then you've committed murder by neglect. He's pointing out that there's no choice. whether to act or not act, that's not the question. It's the nature of the thing. You're going to have to act one way or another in this. All right. So the opposition intensifies here. And now the plot, how they're going to destroy him. The Pharisees combined with the Herodians, they would normally have been at odds with each other. These Herodians were a political party, supporters of Herod. But the enemies of the Lord are able to get together when it comes to opposition to him. Now in 7 to 12 there, he withdraws to the sea. And Jesus with his disciples withdrew to the sea. Now in Matthew 12:15, in the parallel account, it points out that he, having heard of this plot to kill him, he withdrew to the sea. He'll die when he's ready, but not till he's ready. In the meantime, he's going to not make it easy for them to take him. And a great multitude from Galilee followed, and from Judea and from Jerusalem, from Idumea and beyond the Jordan, and about Tyre and Sidon, a great multitude, hearing what great things he did, came unto him. And he spake to his disciples that a little boat should wait on him because of the crowd, lest they should throng him. In chapter 4, how did he use that boat? Did you read on to chapter 4, verse 1? Just, separated himself a little bit from the crowd, just moved the boat out there and was able to teach him. They were just pressing in on him too close. Lest they should throng him. For he had healed many, insomuch that as many as had plagues pressed upon him that they might touch him. And the unclean spirits, whensoever they beheld him, fell down before him and cried, saying, Thou art the Son of God. And he charged them much that they should not make him known. And we made a little bit of comment on that before, so I'm not going to take time to deal with it. But just notice that that the crowds continue together, and Mark just reports this as a matter of historical fact, that he was teaching, he was doing these works. It drew crowds. The reputation, his reputation grew, and people thronged in upon him. And now the choosing of the 12 in 13 to 19. And he goeth up into the mountain and calleth unto him whom he himself would. And they went unto him, and he appointed 12 that they might be with him, and that he might send them forth to preach and to have authority to cast out demons. And in the rest of that, the 12 apostles are just named. Now this is connected with the situation in two ways, it seems to me, in this context. One is the plot to kill him. That makes it very clear that what? You know, the cross cast its shadow. He's headed for the cross. He's not going to be here just indefinitely. He chooses 12 apostles. They'll carry on. But there's another thing. There's another thing in this context. In 7 to 12, all this about the crowds, so many crowds and people and thronging in upon him, and he chooses 12, and what purpose will that serve?
Couldn't do all the work himself.
All right, he's going to send them out, and they'll have power to teach and to cast out the demons, and even during his personal ministry, he sends them just as a part of their training. But the choosing here at this point, it seems to me to be connected with those two things in the situation. And then we need to look at this body of material from the middle part of verse 19 there through 30 that deals with the charge about being in league with Satan. And he cometh into a house, and the multitude cometh together again, so that they could not so much as eat bread. And when his friends heard it, they went out to lay hold on him, for they said, He's beside himself. Why would they say that? Well, he's just so caught up in this, not even taking time to eat. And I think his friends, it's his loved ones. When you read the end of the chapter, it shows his family coming to him, his mother and his brothers, and they're concerned about him. And they come. I think the special reference of that is to them. And they are not too much in tune with what he is all about. And here he's going without food, and he just seems a fanatic, just lost in this, and so they said he's out of his head. He's beside himself. But there's another opinion. These fellows, they say, we know what it is. And the scribes that came down from Jerusalem said, He hath Beelzebub, and by the prince of the demons casteth he out the demons. I'll tell you how he's able to order these demons around like that. Well, he's in league with the devil. It's by the prince of the demons that he casts them out. So he answers them. Verse 23, and he calleth them unto him, and saith unto them in parables, how can Satan cast out Satan? And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. See, these are parables. A kingdom, any kingdom, divided against itself cannot stand. And if a house be divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. Abraham Lincoln was able to quote this when the country was divided. Any house, any kingdom, divided against itself cannot stand. And so it's a parable, two parallel lines involved here. Here's his application, verse 26. And if Satan hath risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but hath an end. Now I think it's not that Satan couldn't do that, but that he's got too much sense. He wouldn't work against himself in that way. And so that answers them. But in what follows now, he shows them what the real state of the case was in verse 27. But no one can enter into the house of the strong man and spoil his goods, except he first bind the strong man, and then he will spoil his house. You're going to rob somebody, go in and plunder the house, just carry off the booty. You cannot do that until you deal with the master of the house, the strong man. And so, what is to be seen in this casting out of demons? Not that Jesus is in league with the devil, but since he is plundering the devil's territory, here are these people that had been possessed by demons, occupied territory for the devil, and Jesus is driving them out. He's plundering, despoiling the devil's territory. The real significance of that is the strong man has been bound. He has overpowered the devil. That's the real significance of that, the thing he's pointing out here. Now, warning, verses 28 and 29, it grows out of what they had said. Verily I say unto you, all their sins shall be forgiven unto the sons of men, and their blasphemies wherewithsoever they shall blaspheme. But whosoever shall blaspheme against the Holy Spirit hath never forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. Because they said, here's the key to understanding this, because they said, he hath an unclean spirit. That's why he said what he did about that. They said he hath an unclean spirit. He's casting out demons by the prince of the demons. Now the fact of it was by the power of the Holy Spirit. And in Matthew's account of this, in Matthew chapter 12 and verse 28, he says it is by the power of the Spirit of God that he was casting out the demons. And the thing that he was doing by the power of the Spirit of God, they say, is by the power of the devil. And he warns them about the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit because they said he hath an unclean spirit. Look at the state of their mind. There was nothing Jesus did, no miracle, that so clearly, just on the face of it, proved that he was against Satan and acting for God than the casting out of demons. Just on the face of it, you see that he's in opposition to Satan. And they take that thing where it was so clear that he was against Satan, and they say he's doing it by the power of Satan. When somebody will do that, when the evidence is that clear and they are that perverse, what can he do for them? I mean, he's done the thing that most clearly shows that he's against Satan, and they've rejected that. What's left? Well, nothing's left. There's no way they can be forgiven. I think that's the point of that. We've got to spend 1 minute on the last section. There's an important point here. They make an admission when they said they're doing it by the power of Beelzebub. What do they admit? He was doing it. Don't you know they would have denied it if they could? They admit that he was doing the miracles. His mother and his brothers come to him in this last paragraph, and it gives him the occasion to speak about spiritual kinship. They say, your mother and your brothers, they want you, they're asking for you. And he answered them and said, verse 33, who is my mother and my brethren? And looking round on them that sat round about him, he said, behold, my mother and my brethren, for whosoever shall do the will of God, the same as my brother and sister and mother. Think about this a little bit. The relationship that to Jesus was truest and realest was his relationship with God. I doubt if there's been a man, I know there is not, before him or after him, who was so conscious of this relationship with God, and his whole life was to do the will of God. I came down from heaven not to do mine own will, but the will of him that sent me, he says in John 6:33. And he has a kinship. He feels a kinship that surpasses ordinary physical kinship, a kinship with those who have that same kind of commitment to the will of God. Those are his kinfolks, those who do the will of God. That'll be a good conclusion for this lesson. We'll have to quit with it at that point.